Yeah, to those people out there that say that life is boring and they don't know what to do, shoot, you can start looking into politics. And the problem there is making sure the fire hose doesn't just drown you completely, because there's so much going on.
Good morning, Idaho. Welcome to the Local Yokel Idaho podcast, where we talk about what is going on in the wonderful state of Idaho. For those tuning in for the first time, we like to have a little banter before we get into the stories, but I understand if you're short on time, so we have provided the timestamps in the description so you can jump straight to the stories that you're interested in. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for staying for the banter. I know I always enjoy the time to have it with John and to talk with you guys. Hope you're all having a wonderful Memorial Day weekend, be that staying here in town and celebrating those that served with us, or out on the road traveling, as we kind of talked about last week, because I think it's like they're estimating 12% of the population is going to do that. But in any case, I hope you're enjoying your time and that this episode can be a good companion to it. That said, let's not forget John, who will be joining me again to co-host.
Yeah, I am here, and we've had a decent week. It's been nice and cool. I have enjoyed the temperature coming down a little bit. Sadly, I wasn't outside umpiring baseball games this week, so I didn't get to enjoy it completely. But no, it's been a good week. We don't have any plans coming up for Memorial Day. It'll just kind of be a chill day at our household. I do know that swimming pools are opening up here in the valley. Splash pads are opening up here in the valley, and my children are beyond excited about those
They're
things.
water bugs.
Oh my gosh, I came out at lunchtime and my wife was telling them these things, and there was this chorus of cheers that was ear splitting, and it continued for minutes on end. And
it was like the ringing echo from like a yodeler. You're like, no, go away.
Yeah. Well, and what's really funny, so I love the water too, and I can be in the water forever. I'm a heavier set guy. I have a lot of blubber on me, and so I can be in cold water for a long period of time. Half of my children, well, I guess I have 5, so half doesn't really work, but half of my children are like that, where they can just be in cold water all day and not matter. Right. And the other half are like my wife, who she freezes. And it's really funny watching them. And they've always been this way, where my daughters will just be in the water, or I guess 2 of them will be in the water and won't ever get cold, and they'll be fine, and they'll swim for hours and hours and hours. But then my son's just like, oh, I'm in the water. I swam. I liked it. And now my entire body has turned blue. I am shaking and shivering uncontrollably. And then he'll go and sit in the sun. And it's really funny.
Yeah, that is me. There's definitely that dynamic as well. My father, you all know him. He also has a bit of insulationing on him. And there have been a couple funny stories of he's like, oh, I'm like, what temperature is the water, Dad? He's like, oh, it's super comfortable. It's warm.
It's fine.
I get it. I'm like, it's like Antarctica in here. I'm dying. I'm freezing.
Well, it's crazy. I remember reading a story a long time ago about there were some people that did swimming in like sub-zero temperatures, and their bodies actually grew a layer of, I don't know if you'd call it blubber, but they grew like a layer of blubber on their bodies. And it was crazy. Like their bodies adapted to the cold water.
Right.
It was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah,
so that apparently is a real thing.
Body will do.
Yeah. Right. But yeah. Anyway, splash pads and pools are opening. So a lot of excitement in store for the valley here.
Yeah, you got that. And then I think there'll probably be some more hiking trails. I don't know all of them. Best to probably call ahead to a couple of them, to the local ranger's office or different things, because snow actually still is a thing in Idaho, which is very, very true. But there's a lot of hiking trails I know that have opened up. I want to say the trail back into Silver City opens up this Memorial Day, or that's usually the schedule it goes with. So if you're over by like the Murphy, Owyhee area, you could do that. A lot of those areas over there are really great for hiking this time of year, and we've talked about that in some previous episode that, I don't know, John can put a time card that pops out or something. But we've talked about that in the spring, they're really great to hike because they're so green and lush and beautiful. And they haven't quite had their full cook time when it comes to summer, when then all those beautiful grasses that made it look so lush start to get into your hiking shoes and stuff. So it's usually the best time to do those. I know there's a bunch of different like bike trails you can go on. If you're up north, there's probably some other trails and things that are opening up. There's always I'm always amazed how many people don't go to them, but like if you can find your local botanical gardens, I know the one in Ketchum's really great. I know I've heard the one in Boise is, but surprisingly, I live the closest to that, and that's one I haven't gone to. And then the one in Moscow is also a really, really good one to go see, but some stuff to definitely do on the memorial, which I think as of the day I'm recording this, but it will have come out before the episode. I did an interview with Christopher Boyd, who won his race here in Canyon County for the prosecuting attorney. If you want to see that interview, recommend going and checking that out. That was really interesting to hear that, especially in line with Memorial Day and those that served. He has a background there, going to Afghanistan and a couple other places, and kind of bringing that background into his prosecuting career there. So want to check that out. That might be a great thing. And also, I am so glad the primary is over. If anyone cannot tell, we are recording this in a very tight window because this week has been crazy. I was out till about 1 a.m. The night of the primary, like talking and going to different things and stuff, and then trying to get certain interviews, which there's some of them that we missed the dot. Christopher Boyd's going to be one of those, and there's another one coming down the line. But man, it's crazy, and I'm so glad it's over. Hopefully that means I will be able to work on some other stuff that we've been meaning to do for the show for a little bit, but
who knows? It's over now. I will say, so my brother, he served with the Marines as well, was over in Afghanistan. And it's always funny to hear him talk about that because it'll be either in the sandbox or in Afrakistan is the term that gets used. And it always makes me laugh. I mean, you know, for anybody who's listening who's from there, I don't really apologize because I don't know what any of the countries are there, and you know it is what it is. But yeah, Afrakistan was the term that got thrown around, and I enjoyed it, and it made me laugh. So there you go.
Right. Yeah, it's been crazy. Also, there again, recommending that interview with Boyd there. Really, really enjoyed having that. Definitely a lot of interesting results out of the primary there. Granted, we'll be talking about that in the second story here.
I'm gonna say we'll be talking about those results.
Yep.
The Boyd interview I enjoyed. I didn't know much about what the prosecuting attorney does or why that's a role. I learned a lot, and so I encourage you, viewer, to go check it out. I know it's after the election or after the primary has already happened, but he did get the nomination, so he will be the guy. So you're not really missing anything by listening to it, even though the vote already happened.
If you're in Canyon County, at least you know more about your prosecuting attorney and why he's there, why it's important, and the guy who won it.
Well, and if you're not in Canyon County, you can listen to the interview and at least get to know a little bit about what a prosecuting attorney does and why he's there and why it's an important role. Also, you guys talked a little bit about how judges are appointed and why his thoughts on that process. And so even if you're not in the Canyon County area, that there is still value in that interview. So go check it out. It was good. Yeah,
that is a topic that I first heard Theo Wald talk on. And then I heard he had been talking about, and so I wanted to ask him about that it's really interesting that Idaho, compared to the state that keeps giving us a lot of people, California's judge system, it's mostly done 100% electorally, where there's a vote that's done. But here in Idaho, there's actually a board that decides that. But if you want to learn more about that, go check out the interview where we kind of went into that a little bit more nitty-gritty. But in any case, enough of the banter. We will move into our first story here, where we'll be breaking down a Idaho bill. So in this week's episode of Idaho Bill Breakdown, we're going to be talking about House Bill 597 related to immunization exemptions for adults. Last week on our Idaho Bill Breakdown series, we discussed House Bill 688, which states that tax dollars cannot be used for gender transition surgeries. This week, as I said, we're going to be examining House Bill 597, which gives students over the age of 18 more ability to object to getting a vaccine. We'll be breaking down this bill, seeing what it says, how it changes things, and most importantly, how it affects your everyday life here as an Idahoan. So with that said, John, would you like to first kind of say what the bill says exactly?
So here are two things that the bill changes. So first, any student 18 or older can submit a signed statement to school officials stating their objection to immunization requirements on religious or other grounds, which is a good thing, I think. And then two, this exemption applies to students at all levels of education, including high school, college, university, and other institutes of higher learning. So those additions are worth talking about because prior to this bill being signed into law, Idaho required students to receive certain immunizations in order to attend school, with only 2 main exemptions instead of the 4 that now exist. Those 2 old pre-existing exemptions are these. First, parents could submit a signed statement from a licensed physician stating that the child's medical condition prevents them from receiving immunizations, i.e. if you have Crohn's disease or you have, what are some of the other ones that come to mind? Leukemia or something else that really bars you from getting immunized. You can have a doctor say, yeah, him getting that shot is a bad idea, so he's exempt. And then the second one is religious or other grounds exemption. So parents could submit a signed statement objecting to immunizations on religious or other grounds. So this bill expands the existing religious or other grounds exemption to include students 18 and older, allowing them to make their own decisions regarding immunizations. Previously, only parents could claim this exemption for their minor children, which that does seem a little odd to me that as a parent, you can claim an exemption for your child, but you as an adult can't claim an exemption for yourself. It just seems a little strange.
It is
so
kind
I'm glad
of
that they expanded that.
Right. I think what kind of happened there is that there probably at one point was a bit more of a focus on like, hey, we want to give, parents control over their kids and, what they can and cannot do, right? Or what the school system can or cannot do to them. But then in the mix, they're like, wait a second, what happened to all the students that, they're adults and they're at college, and the college also is trying to do the same thing as the public school tries to do sometimes and saying, you need to have this, you need to have that. And I think this is kind of where that bill came out of. But generally looking at what that means, I would say the first tenet would be it's just more control for adults in education, that you can say, no, I don't want that. It gives you more teeth with BSU and more options with NNU or not NNU. Well, I guess, NNU and then U of I up north or around the state that you can refuse and have more options to do so.
Well, and I feel like this probably came to a head because of COVID-19 and the ridiculousness that was placed on the COVID vaccinations.
Right.
Regardless of efficacy or anything else that YouTube either will or will not allow you to talk about at this point, those things don't even need to be talked about. It was more the fact that there were government entities and then private entities that were saying that you must do this thing to enter the premise. And when it's the government requiring that to happen for government institutions, well, that starts posing serious problems to say, well, to enter this premise, you must have this formula injected into your body. Really?
Right.
That seems a little sketchy. And so it makes sense to me that we're expanding some of these definitions to include those people who would be directly affected by these things. And it's like you said, and like we've talked about before, I don't think the fact that we didn't have this on the law books, or the fact that the old one didn't extend to students over 18, I have a hard time believing that was malicious. Something tells me it just didn't come up. Or if it did come up, it was so rare that why do you need a whole bill for it to say that the whole system needs to be aware of this? But man alive, after the COVID debacle, I'm glad we went there because we didn't know it was a problem. Now we know it's a problem. Now problem solved. Moving on.
Right. And I mean, on the opposite side of it, kind of growing up in Idaho, there is very much, and we've talked about it, I don't know what episode, but it was someone back, you can go find it and search for it, and it'll hopefully pull up there, where we actually looked at, Idaho has one of the lowest immunization rates in the nation. Yep. So Idahoans in general do not like vaccines or just don't care for them. Nope. So this is kind of a progression of that. But as someone who's grown up in that, I can say for a fact that there was a lot of times with higher education, I knew friends that were like, they wanted me to get it. And I said, I would rather not. And they would object, and the college would be like, all right, fine. Because there wasn't a precedent. There wasn't a law that was forcing the colleges to do it. But it was also like, well, that would be pretty petty to make you take a vaccine or inject something. So we're just not going to do that. Yeah, we wanted you to come to college. We want you to spend your money here at this form of education. And so if that's your one requirement or stickler, fine. Well, as you said, COVID-19 came around and it became a stickler. And so a law needed to be there that gave people the teeth or the legal ammunition to stand their ground. And particularly on that, towards the end of freedom, I want to touch real quick that we've talked about it before in the show. There is the not the traditional, but there is the more modern term of freedom, which is freedom is freedom is the definition of the least constraints upon me. So if you get less constraints, then I'm more free, right? The more traditional definition of freedom, which is one that I'm still learning and getting used to, and it's not something that comes organically, but it's one that I think our forefathers very much held to, is this idea that you, by default, are a slave, and that slavery is towards sin, that you are fallen and you are broken. And that not that per se, there are certain laws that do restrict your freedom. And how are they restricting your freedom? Well, they're restricting your freedom towards the good. And there are other laws that orientate you towards the good. And those laws are freeing, that you can have a law, you can have a rule that creates freedom. Not every law that is created restricts and takes away freedom. And so in this example, yes, there's one side where it very much from a more modern definition is a form of getting more freedom to people. But on the other hand, if you're looking at it through that more traditional lens, it is a law that is allowing for people to have that right, to have that ability, to have that decision-making process, because we know more and more that vaccines aren't a one-to-one objective, it saves you, or it's helpful, or it's always beneficial. So giving more exemptions, more of a process to that allows us to have a better opportunity to orientate to what is objectively good or true.
Yeah, well, and looking at freedom is a really interesting thing. And looking at the human condition, it's a thing that my wife and I talk about with our children in terms of parenting. And knowing a little bit about human nature really helps, because when you give children boundaries and you say, all right, so these are the walls in which you can play. And it's really evident with really young children.
Oh, yeah.
When there are clear, defined rules and boundaries, and even just like physical boundaries within this space with these toys, you can do whatever you want. That's true freedom, because the child now has freedom to do whatever they want. Everything in that space is good for them. It is wholesome for them. It's educational for them. It helps them to grow. It helps them to enjoy their life. Now, the more modern definition of freedom is no, those walls, that is constricting freedom. And so those walls need to be done away with.
The walls that keep the toddler from the stairwell.
Exactly. And freedom means that the toddler needs to be free to go experience the stairwell. And that freedom, well, all right, so now toddler is free to go explore the stairs, which at the proper time and place, that's great. Stairs are fun. I can remember riding down on stuffed animals and cardboard boxes, and like stairs are great.
Right.
They're also painful, and for toddlers, you can fall down them. And so like that idea of freedom being, I can do whatever I want whenever I want it. Well, the problem is those walls that bound your freedom, if we're going to use freedom in the more modern way, well, those walls are actually protecting you. They're protecting your health. They're protecting your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health. They're protecting your well-being.
They're protecting you from your sinful self.
They're protecting you from your sinful self. They're giving you the ability to do all of the things that you were designed and created to do, to enjoy life to its fullest. Those walls are there to give you freedom. And so it's definitely not the modern way of looking at freedom. It's very backwards. But when we look at it on a human level, gosh, and that sounds so weird, but liking it to a child, again, those walls are put in place for the benefit of the child. Those walls are there to help the child experience life in the best way possible. And that's what the laws that we have surrounding us, that's what they should do. That's what God's law does for us. It gives us those walls and says, hey, live in this space and then do whatever you want. And it's truly freeing to live within that space, because you can do whatever you want within that set of laws. And it's great.
Right. and bringing it, there again. We've gone very much to the philosophical, and I love it. And anybody listening to the show knows me and John can get there in a hurry. But bringing it, then applying it here to the topic of vaccination. By no means are we sitting here when we're talking about this bill saying that vaccines are bad, end of story. Not saying that.
Or good, end of story. It's not the vaccines in themselves are good or bad. They are a thing.
Right. And that hopefully in a representative republic, that when we are trying to strive for what is true, what is good, what is right, we should write laws that help us to orientate, or us as a society or as a nation, towards that direction. So there's going to be times where, that restriction we gave ourselves, wasn't a good restriction. And so, there is a point to removing restrictions and other things. And then there's another point to adding restrictions, to be like, oh yeah, we built these things called nukes. There's kind of some restrictions we need to put on these things. That's an extreme example. But with this, and bringing it back, to the applicable part for you and for the average Idahoan, this one gives you more ability to deal if you're in college or in a school institution, that they do still have a lot of power if you're in them, to have that discussion, to kind of fight back and have a little bit of ammunition, be like, hold on, it's not 100% here. We've seen evidence otherwise, and this bill is informed according to that vaccines, as maybe we previously saw, shouldn't be lauded as high, or there should be more groundwork upon that. And I think that's really good for Idahoans, and I think it's a cool thing to know that was signed. Hey there, if you're enjoying the show, make sure to subscribe or follow us on YouTube, Rumble, or Twitter to stay up to date on all things Idaho. For even more content and to support our work, check out our locals page. If you found our content valuable, please like and share it with your friends and family. Your support helps us spread the word about our beautiful state and keeps Idaho informed and engaged. Thank you for being part of the local yokel Idaho community. Now, back to the show. Now, as we teased early in the show, I know this is going to be a politically heavy one, but this last week was just politics galore. And there wasn't as much stories that weren't political, so bear with us here. I know if it's not your favorite thing, sorry, but these are things I think are relevant to know about Idaho and to be really locally involved. That said, as many of you know, the May 21st primary for Idaho happened last week, and it races for Idaho congressman all the way to precinct committee positions were decided. In this segment, we'll give you an overview of the results, how hot races finished, and what this means for the state heading towards November. But with that, let's first look at the overall analysis of what happened with the election and some different details.
Yeah, so for contested Republican primaries, the margins of victory varied considerably. Some were blowouts, others were like the tightest elections we've seen in a long time. One example of this tight race, in State House District 30 seat B Republican primary, Ben Furman edged out Julianne Young by just 2 votes. 50.01% to 49.99%. And Tyler, I'm not sure if this one has even been finalized yet. I saw in my Google feed this morning as I was getting up and starting the day that recounts are happening. Do we know what the current status of that one even is?
Yeah, so these numbers I grabbed as of today on Friday from the Secretary of State's office. Those are the percentages that are sitting there right now. Now, if they're really close, if it's a vote or two off, they're going to have to do a recount. So if you're listening to this, listening to it Sunday or next week, please go out and check those numbers. I think if I remember correctly, let me see here. If I click my link down here at the bottom, it's 97.7% reported, so there's a certain percent there plus recounts. I don't know what the speed of government will be on this one, because, government can be a slow behemoth. So maybe none of this will change that we're talking about on some of those races that are contested. I can't remember right now what the percentage is. There's a certain margin if it's, I want to say if it's a margin of like maybe 10 votes, or it might be even 20 or something, then the person's eligible for a recount.
Yeah, I remember talking about that last election cycle. There was a really close one here in Ada County somewhere. But anyway, so that's the really close one. For the 25 Republican legislative primaries that were head-to-head matchups, the average margin of victory was 27.4 percentage points. So granted, the median was 22.3, as there were a few blowouts that really skewed the average higher. Now, one part that's also really interesting to look at here is how many lawmakers were able to hold their positions and how many new people got in. The incumbents didn't fare as well as they normally do, specifically in the House. So in the Senate, we saw 14 incumbents win and then 8 newcomers. And then in the House, there were only 24 incumbents that won their primary as compared to 36 newcomers. So the House is going to be all kinds of new people. 60% of the seats going to non-incumbents based on these primary results. However, in the Senate, like I said, it's less pronounced, but it's still significant. 36% of the seats are going to non-incumbents. It's crazy.
It's going to be super, super interesting to see how that affects the overall legislature and stuff. I mean, we're kind of doing this a little bit more freestyle than we normally do our stories. But one part that's going to be really interesting, and I'm going to try to scroll so I can have the teleprompter so I can look at the thing, is I would argue that seeing this amount of turnover means that people are really involved, which is really encouraging. You don't have close races and you don't have a bunch of new blood come in if people aren't involved. If people are very lazily going to vote and just saying, oh, they're incumbent, I'm just going to do that because, I don't want things to change. The devil I don't know, right? And so they just choose the same incumbent again and again or something like that. Seeing a lot of new blood, I think, to me anyways, tells me that there's people that are involved, they know, and they're voting with what they care about. Obviously there's some incumbents that people like. My incumbent in my district, all of them I'm very happy with, and so I voted for them again. But in other people's districts, they probably didn't like their incumbents or other things. And you see that being played out with people really voting.
Well, and it was, I don't remember what show I was listening to. I think it was Tim Pool. I don't remember what guest was there. And shoot, it could have been any of the other shows I listened to. But anyway, they were talking about voting and why people vote and what causes a large voter turnout. And the largest voter turnouts we've seen have been when people are upset with how things are going. Or they're just like when Obama was voted as president, there was a massive outturning of votes because he did something to strike the national narrative.
Right.
But normally when people come out to vote, when you have high voter turnout is when there's problems and people are uncomfortable and they're unhappy. And so there's 2 stories I think that are coming out of this that I see. One, people are unhappy. What are they unhappy about? Well, we can make a ton of guesses about that, and a lot of them could be educated.
Right.
There's all kinds of things, but we live in a highly polarized time right now. And not only do we live in a highly polarized time, but we live in a highly national aware time. Like we're all aware of national stories and national trends because that's all anyone ever seems to care about covering. And so like, does that national, I don't know, unhappiness, does that trickle down to us looking at our local lawmakers and going, well, you side with those national darn people, and so I'm not voting for you anymore because bad. Now, I don't know. It's interesting, but I know that is one of the reasons that people will come out to vote is because they're unhappy with how things are going.
One of the things that was shocking to me on that is, it definitely is true. When people are mad, they go and vote. You'll have the average person that might not be politically active, but then they'll turn around and you're like, wait, you're voting? Yeah, because this has got a star and blah, 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 fill in the blank, right?
Yep.
But the part that struck me with that, specifically on our first result here, talking about some of the high profile races and what they ended up being, was the one with Mike Simpson and Scott Cleveland. We did an interview with Scott Cleveland. Yeah. I expected Scott Cleveland to get a lot closer because of how unhappy people are with at the national level, the level of spending, all these things. And Mike Simpson and the Republican Party anyways, in party politics, I know party politics and the average Republican can be very different at times, has not been very happy with Mr. Simpson there. So I expected it to be a little tighter. Granted, 35,036 went to Scott Cleveland. I don't have them over here because I have a screenshot here. But Mike Simpson did 53,476. So definitely a bit of a challenge, but I expected it to be a lot closer with the way that Mike Simpson has seemingly been unliked.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem of having a 3-person race, though,
yes.
Is that third person always skews the numbers in favor. Well, not always. The third part or the third Yeah, sure. The third party candidate, they skew numbers in terms of the moderate. And looking at this, I'd probably say Mike Simpson is the moderate. So you now have two conservative, at least I assume conservative. I don't know anything about Sean Higgins. I don't know if most people know anything about Sean Higgins. But that was 9,000 votes that more than likely would have gone to Scott Cleveland. So I'm willing to say that there's an extra 10% that would have gone to Cleveland had Higgins not been in the race.
And then you would have seen like a 40.
It would have been 46-54.
Right, which is a lot closer.
It's a lot closer, but still, I don't know, that one is one that surprises me. But then again, it doesn't surprise me because Mike Simpson is so deep into politics. He's been in for so long. He's
Forever.
So entrenched. Like he's the guy, and so he has all of the money to spend and throw at everything. So it doesn't surprise me. It saddens me. I think Cleveland would have done a great job, but it doesn't surprise me at all.
It also was shocking. If you're someone over in the eastern half of the state in his district, you can comment below because I obviously have not traveled that whole area during the primary because a lot of it I need to be here in the valley. But I saw a ton of Scott Cleveland signs. I don't even know what Mike Simpson's signs looks like for this primary because I didn't see one.
I have no idea.
Which is kind of interesting.
It'd be interesting to look at breakdowns per area on that one because I just don't know. What I would be curious about is if you are a Simpson voter, which apparently there's over half of us in the Republican Party who voted for him. Tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why Cleveland is not the right guy. Tell me why Simpson is.
We'd love to hear you.
Apparently we're on the wrong side here, and Simpson is well loved. So, but then again, like if you're the super long time incumbent, should you really be winning by a slim margin like that? I don't know. That seems to tell a story that he's not as well loved as he should be for having been serving for, I think, longer than I've been alive.
Yeah, he's been in Idaho politics for a long time. We've talked about that at depth about his dam policy. I hope that stalls. But that said, keeping us moving forward, the next one that I know we've talked about on this show a bit and related to the firearm bill that happened on private property. Scott Herndon lost his re-election bid on the primary by even a slimmer margin. So Jim Woodward got it at 8,219. So that's 51 point. You can round it up to about 52% of the vote.
Yeah, 52%.
And then Scott Herndon got it at 48 or lost at 48%. So close, much closer race than that one, but sad to see. I know it's causing some mourning with certain conservatives and stuff who really like Scott Herndon. I know on the Idaho Freedom Foundation's rating system, if you like it or don't like it, he is pretty highly rated on there. I've only usually heard good things about him. The only people I haven't heard good things are people who are a little bit more moderate. Also, funny thing is Jim Woodward, if I remember correctly, don't take this as gospel, was the person that Scott Herndon originally unseated when he came in as a new person. So it's like incumbent to incumbent now. Like the past incumbent has beat the incumbent who wasn't the incumbent. So that's kind of an interesting dance back and forth. If you want to go on social media, you can see of some Scott Herndon's back and forth and stuff. He's kind, but he's also a little fiery. We'll put it that way. I know another one of those that's been, or not another one of those, but one that's been exciting. I know people have been excited about. I don't follow it too closely. Is Zito over there in District 8 won her primary. She had previously in 2022 been in the legislature, so she's not the incumbent, but has been in the past. Beat another gentleman. The main joy is that the gentleman before her, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce. I think it's Jeff.
That would be Jeff Schrader.
He, I've heard, and according to IFF's rating there, has a dismal spending habit. He really likes approving spending stuff rather than in the time that Zito was in office. She did not like to approve spending a lot of stuff. So
there you
some
go.
Conservatives are really excited about that. Another one I know is less exciting, but I'm kind of happy about it. I met the guy. I think he's really cool. It'll be interesting to see what he's going to do. And he's completely brand new blood. He hasn't, besides being over in, I think, Owyhee County, part of the Central Committee, there and being a youth chair and stuff in the Republican Party is Brandon Shippey. He won his race. They're again close. He won it by 51% against
51-48.
48 roughly. So it'll be really interesting. He ran on a Liberty ticket, so he should be in the same group as
Interesting.
Scott Herndon and a lot of the darlings of the Idaho Freedom Foundation. So it'll be interesting to see if he also is someone who doesn't spend a lot or what his profile is, because there's nothing to go on because he hasn't been in any other legislative position, but he looks really promising. Another one that was, I think, the biggest topic of the entire state was the Rachel Hazelip and Mike Moyle race. Rachel lost by 40, well, he ran up about 46% because it's 45.65. And then Mike Moyle won by 54.35. For the sake of probably my own safety in some small way, this race I know has divided the party heavily. There are people that I love dearly that love Rachel and want her to run, and I actually have a very good friendship with her. And I think she would have done well at it. On the flip side, there's a lot of people who really like Moyle. And in all fairness, if you look at his, there again, not saying it's the perfect standard, but his Idaho Freedom Foundation score on the index there, he's not horrible. He's not great, but he's not horrible. Like, I think most of his scores are above 50. So he's
that's not too bad.
Kind of like a moderate type of guy. He's just been in there again, politics a really, really long time. And Rachel is younger and hasn't held any legislative position. So the race was more centered around an age bracket of that there's this dinosaur and we need to get rid of the dinosaur. And the other angle was, why are we having some young person come in? I'm experienced. I'm the guy that knows how to do things. You love me. You enjoy me. Let's keep working and let's keep pushing the ball downfield and have sensible Republican values in the House, or what was it? Yeah, House.
Well, what's interesting with that, and we're seeing that, we're seeing that across the country with existing lawmakers who are just aging out and getting older. The boomer generation is getting really old. She'll be able to come back in a couple of years and run again.
Oh, yeah.
And again.
Well, this is her second time running against him.
So she can do it again and again. And yes, it costs money. Yes, it's expensive. But at some point, Moyle's going to hang up the cape and he'll be done. Because, well, there comes a time when you have to. Right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So I'm going to speed through these a little bit because I actually have to head out here. But that said, I know another one that people are really excited about is Julie Yamamoto lost her race. That is one that I know people have been very happy about because she was one of the Republicans in, House, that didn't vote yes on the pornography in school library bill.
Yeah.
She voted against different abortion laws and different stuff. And so people were really yelling that she's not really Republican. She's a Democrat and she should run on a Democrat ticket. So her losing that race, I know a lot of people are very happy about that. Another one it's high profile-ish, but just people are happy to see that it happened is Brian Lenny. I think the Republican Party gave him an award at the Canyon County Lincoln Day dinner for being, best Republican for representing the party's values until actually holding to it or something like that.
Cool.
So he's quite loved by the leadership. I don't know about the general bit, but it looks like he won it pretty well, a little close, 44 to 55% margin there. But I know that's one race that people are really happy about. Another one I've heard some people going back and forth around is District 13, which loves to make a lot of sound in the state. Steve Tanner won that primary, and Amy Henry, which I heard a lot of people talking about, but she actually got the least amount of votes, which was kind of interesting due to the amount of times I heard her brought up. But Steve Tanner, who was the favored person in that position, ended up getting it. I'm not going to get into the drama of District 13.
Right, whatever. Just looking at the numbers, this is another situation where that third person really skews these numbers. None of these three got over 50%.
Yeah.
But Amy Henry was at 18%, and then Kenny Roten, who was the closest to winning, or who was the next second, 36. So if one or the other of those aren't running, and that second group votes aren't split, it's I don't know. It's a fascinating thing when you look at 3-person races, who takes away from who.
Right.
I don't know the full story here, but the numbers are interesting. So the last one here is that Jeff Kaiser won over Chuck Winder over in District 20 for Senate. That was a 52-47 split with Kaiser coming out ahead.
Yeah, on that race, I know the main reason I had it in here is Chuck Winder is famously known for being a very big spender. He loves to spend. And
there you go.
Certain parts of the Republican Party, as we all know, especially right now with the economy, as we talked about earlier, don't like to spend a lot of money.
It seems like that's become a very important thing for Idaho voters is how much of my money are you spending on things I don't care about?
Right.
So then the real question here is what does this mean? What is the legislation? What is the body going to look like? And gosh, what's even going to happen? I do know that as a first-time lawmaker coming in, there is a massive learning curve. These guys, there's a ton of things you have to learn to be able to govern effectively, or even efficiently, or even at all. You know, going to committees
Right.
and how bills progress through various things, and gosh, just how things work, where your office is, where do you park, all of that stuff. These people are going to have to learn. But you know, if they're there because they love it, they'll learn it and they'll do a good job.
Very interesting. I know a certain degree of this. A lot of these races, these people have won their primaries, and there's no challenger on the opposite side of the aisle for them. The main area you're going to see that is maybe more in Boise or blue areas where Democrats actually did field some challengers. For the most part, most of the reason we're reporting more on the primary, and you might think if you've come from another state, you're like, why are you reporting on this so much? You still have the general election. Well,
Nope, this is the election.
Well, it's basically in Idaho because we're such a Republican state. Whoever gets the Republican nomination kind of gets the position for the most part. With that said, there are a few races, which we'll report on those when it gets to that point in November for those elections, that may change this up a little bit. But for the most part, the primary in Idaho generally decides what's going to be the makeup of the legislature moving forward.
Well, in most of the states I've lived in, that's been the case, either Republican or Democrat, whether it's Virginia, Michigan, New Mexico, or Idaho. They're all the same in that way, where your area is either Republican or Democrat, and so it's the primary that matters. And it's true even in Idaho. Most of the counties, it's the primary for the Republicans that win. In some of them, the one I'm in, it's the primary for the Democrats that will win. I'm in a Democrat county. I don't like it, but that's who we apparently vote for. Boise loves their Democrats.
Yes.
So there you go.
Yes. At some point, I'm sad to say, as much as I love Boise and I grew up there, it may turn into a bit of a Seattle or a hub there, but I think there's still a lot of hope. I mean, you see areas like Moscow that are blue, but they're turning red in some ways. So it'll be interesting. I think overall, the takeaway that conservatives or Republicans here in Idaho can take is that a lot of the good guard stayed, cleaned a little house, lost a couple people on the way, but it'll be interesting to see what the 2025 legislature will look like. Yeah,
to those people out there that say that life is boring and they don't know what to do, shoot, you can start looking into politics. And the problem there is making sure the fire hose doesn't just drown you completely, because there's so much going on. I will say it's interesting as we see, you mentioned old guard. It's interesting as we see that old guard getting older and younger people, whether it's younger people, your younger, my younger, you know, are we talking millennials, Gen X, or Gen whatever's next? I don't know. But as younger people are coming up, it's interesting to see how things are changing. At some point, the boomers are going to age out, like that you just can't continue living. And my mom's a boomer. It'll be sad to see her go one day. But death is a part of living. I tell my kids that all the time. Like death is a normal part of life. It just happens. We all have that condition. Gosh, what's the line from Fight Club? We're all dying in the Jessica Plath sense of the word. Another reference that you may or may not get, Tyler.
Nope,
I'm sorry.
not going to get it, but keep going.
Fight Club, great movie. But we're all dying. So at some point, the boomers are going to die. And it's going to be left to those of us of younger generations to step up and continue legislating. And so it's going to be interesting over the next, I don't know, 5, 10, 15, 30 years to see what happens in our counties, in our state, in our country, as that old guard moves on out of politics and we've got young people who step up and do it.
Right.
It's a really exciting time to live in. I'm really glad I live in it now, and we'll see what happens in the future. I'm here for it one way or the other.
Thank you for listening to the entire show. I hope you found it both enjoyable and informative. If we missed anything important or got something wrong, please reach out to us via email at lyimedia@protonmail.com or on Twitter @LocalYokelIdaho. We appreciate your support and feedback as we work to bring you the most interesting and important stories across Idaho. That's all for now. Have a great rest of your week. Godspeed.